Hello and welcome to Mental Health. It's a Trap. We're your hosts, Susan and Stephen, mother and son, unraveling the complexities of the mental health traps people fall in. Join us on this podcast journey as we demystify the mental health labyrinth, explore common issues, and provide you with tools to navigate this sometimes extremely daunting terrain. You can expect engaging conversations, personal stories, and probably also have a laugh or two. Access to mental health care should not be what causes you additional stress. We invite you to follow along, and together we can embrace the darkness.
We want to welcome you back, and today we will be talking about the different ways in understanding how to find a better fit in traditional and non-traditional therapies. And just that therapists are trained in different styles, and we all know there's no one size fits all for that. And so we wanted to just talk a little bit about some of those different types of therapy that therapists are generally trained in. And so one of the most common ones is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And it really focuses on thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And it looks at changing our ways of thinking, changing our behavior patterns, and, having a collaborative approach with the therapist that you would be working with to identify how to put those things into practice in order to manage your life more effectively with stress and things and situations that happen in your life. And it really looks at, kind of staying in the present and focusing on those things and not getting caught up in the emotions and all of that, which is really hard for people. Sometimes when we're emotionally charged, it's like thoughts start racing. We start, attributing stuff to like past experiences, and then we take those past experiences and put them on the present ones, and it just becomes chaotic and messy. And so, so I think that, CBT is one that is very widely used in the therapy world. And one of the other more common ones is DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy. And with that one, it's, again, kind of looking at, how do I regulate my emotions when I'm emotionally, dysregulated and I don't know how to deal with something. So, you've got all this turmoil going on inside, and, and sometimes that can put us in unsafe situations, or we have reactive behavior that can be harmful. And so DBT really helps to kind of teach how to regulate the emotions, how to tolerate distress in the body, and be able to manage that as well. And then one of the other biggest pieces is, how to maintain healthy relationships, like, internal work, and then, using that out in your life with the people that you interact with on a daily basis, whether it's family, friends, co-workers. And so, I think when people are emotionally charged, that impacts how they interact with others, right? Mm-hmm. They just get like angry, or they're screaming, or they're crying, and they just can't, regulate that emotional responses that are happening within them. And so it comes out in, inappropriate ways sometimes. And so DBT can really help with a lot of different techniques, and it can be used in a group format where you learn those skills in a group setting, and it can also be done individually. So, it has those two options, which is kind of nice. And then the last one that I wanted to just touch upon is IFS, which is internal family systems therapy. And that really focuses on parts work, and is a therapy that can be used for a lot of trauma work. And so when people experience trauma, it gets kind of compartmentalized in the body with the thoughts the memories, the emotions and feelings and all of that. And so one part can be in control, and the goal is to get all the parts to work together. So IFS kind of works to bring those parts together and gets them to communicate and connect so that you can kind of, be able to work through whatever those traumas are. And so those were the three biggest ones that, that we kind of see in the therapy world. And so I think that it's helpful to kind of have an understanding of what those are, and not that you have to be trained in them.
Mm-hmm. And so you said a big word. How would you describe or tell someone what compartmentalize means?
So what compartmentalize means is, so I describe that as if you've ever seen a nuclear bomb go off and the cloud disperses, it takes everything and it just pushes it out. And so it's not in the same space. So I'm here, and if something happens, it moves out. It's explosive. So it pushes this thing over here, that thing over there, and so it's compartmentalized. It's in different compartments and not in the main compartment. Does that make sense?
It does. I find it an interesting way for it to be explained.
Well, it's probably a dramatic way of explaining it. I mean, it's really profound in that way, though it makes sense when you visualize it. So when, at impact, it just it moves everything out of the center and out. So the parts are everywhere, the pieces are everywhere. So the hope is to bring it all into one place, because it's manageable when it's in one place. Versus jumping from compartment to compartment.
Yeah.
And think of a train. There's different compartments on a train. You have the conductor at the front of the train. You have the food caboose thing, whatever they call that, and then you have the end of the train, and it's compartmentalized. I guess that's another way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Like different sections, or
yes,
areas or parts that you like. If you think about a little bit about IFS and parts work, it's something that you have less attention to. So I think one of the bigger things that's used is you put it on the back burner, even though it might have a higher intensity of needing attention versus
right.
Oh, I have to do my dishes. That goes in the back burner because that's a less needed thing to do in the house. Versus if it's, and it makes sense too, if it's trauma or a car accident or things like that where it might overwhelm you. And in order to function, you have to put it on the back burner so you can go to work, take care of your kids, take care of your responsibilities as a human. Mm-hmm. And I would say almost like that, it would tie into, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, because it talks about tolerance and how can you manage that tolerance and get used to quote unquote getting back to normal, even though there's really never a new normal. It's more of a growth and a change that happens.
Yes.
So what would you say are there any differences between CBT and DBT, or are they the same thing?
I think they're very closely related because, again, so in CBT, you're looking at behaviors and thoughts, right, and emotions. And in DBT, you're kind of looking at the same things. It's just that you get to the end result in different ways, right? So the techniques used in each of those styles is that, in CBT, you're reframing the way you think about things. You're challenging the way you think about things. And, and I think DBT focuses more on regulating the emotion, which again can be in CBT of, my emotion is coming from these thoughts that I'm having and they're not rational, right? And so under DBT, so that's the thing is there's a lot of different styles, but there are a lot of overlaps in the different techniques that are used in each style.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Would it be fair to say that cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of more aligned with like general talk therapy, where you talk about your thoughts and how it impacts your behavior, versus dialectical behavioral therapy, where you might do the similar, you might talk about it, but there's more like activities or exercises that require you to do the work to figure it out, versus kind of talking it out with your therapist or journaling and reframing.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
It's definitely more, DBT is more activity based, like tracking your emotions, tracking the triggers to those emotions, where CBT is more talking about and identifying and then changing behavior patterns, changing thoughts, and which helps with the emotions, right? And so DBT is more activity based, where you're doing a lot of recording and identifying like what triggered me. Why is my emotion so high? Does it make sense that it's that high? What am I responding to? So I think it's definitely more activity based in a group setting.
And so would you say in terms of therapies, like traditional therapy and then non-traditional types of therapies, would you say it's a top-down process or a bottom-up, or both?
In terms of the non-traditional and traditional?
Yeah, I mean, I guess more specifically for the therapies, CBT, DBT, IFS, or therapy in general, would you say it's a top-down process that people work through, or a bottom-up?
I think in general it's a bottom-up. If I'm thinking about, where is the person at the time they're coming to therapy, and what are they looking to work on? And is it something current? Is it something past? Right? So are you referring to that in terms of bottom up, top to bottom, or bottom to top?
So in most of what we do in life, I would say, and I guess I'll say my own opinion, is top-down processing, or how we process from the top, is our head, our thoughts. And bottom up is more of the reactions. So again, it kind of ties back in with DBT, is when you react to something, it's bottom up, because you might like yell or get angry, right? You're not able to regulate that emotion and you react.
Okay.
Versus top down would be you still have the same reaction and the feeling, but you can stop it because your brain is like, nope. And then if you're arguing, or if someone's yelling at you, or if someone's telling you something you don't like, you don't just go off on them.
Right.
So
okay.
Top down gives you the ability to respond versus react. And bottom up is more of the reaction, how the body responds, how the body reacts, right, without being told to do it.
Okay. I guess my head was in a different space of thinking about that. But yeah, no, it makes sense. And so when you think about that, that's kind of how those two different styles work, right? Like CBT is more thought, top down, and DBT is more bottom up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Certainly wasn't where your brain was in the moment.
And that's what's helpful with when you ask questions, right?
Right. And so that's important, is to be able to ask the questions, and it's always hard sometimes to know, well, what questions do I ask, and do I need to understand all the different styles and what therapists are trained in, and and all of that. It's helpful to have an understanding. You don't have to know how to do it. It's just to have an understanding of what do I need help with, what am I bringing to the table, and who is the best fit for me. Right? Be able to ask those questions, and and even ask, hey, you've worked with other clients. What do you find has worked well in general? You can ask those types of questions. You're not asking specifics. You're just trying to find who the right fit is for you.
Yeah, and I think that ties in where it's like you don't have to be the expert in it, but it's still important to ask questions.
Yes.
Based on your situation. So like if you go into therapy for like couples counseling, you might want to ask like, how many couples have you worked with? Or when you work with couples, like what does a session look like? How many sessions, right? If you go a little bit more, it's like, do you accept my insurance? Because I think that's a big thing. Is a lot of times if you go on Psychology Today, profiles will say that they're in network, and sometimes they're not. They might be out of network. They might just be only out of network, even though sometimes it says that they're in network. So even those little things are important, because then you get a bill and you're like, what the hell?
Right. And it's it's important to ask that question, because even if you went on, like, say, Psychology Today, right? Providers change insurance. Insurances are changing all the time. And so sometimes they may not have updated their website to say, I no longer accept this insurance, or I take these other insurances now. And so it's always good to ask. And, insurance is based on the employer, what the employer chooses to give their employees under their insurance plans, whether it's medical or mental health. And so, it's important to say, is there a copay? We talked about this in an earlier discussion about asking if there's a copay, asking if there's a deductible, because now some insurances are now taking the medical deductible and making it the mental health or the behavioral health piece of it under the deductible as well. So it's always just important to ask the question. So, you're trying to make the best informed decision for yourself, and making sure there's no surprises.
Yeah. They definitely don't make it easy for people.
Nope. It is a challenge.
Which, I would say personally, I think that's unfair. It's like, understand your own benefits, like your explanation of benefits. You should know what that is. You need to do that work. And it's like, well, if I'm paying for health insurance, or my company does, I shouldn't need to have to like do all this digging and figuring out, and like, that's what they get paid for, supposedly.
Right. Yeah. And so that's, when insurance companies, when you sign up for insurance at work, or even through the state or whatever it is, it's, there is this ownership of understanding your benefits, right? Because you have to decide, do I want Blue Cross? So say the company's offering 3 different insurance plans. And so you want to pick the plan that meets your needs. So this one might have a higher deductible, The next one might have a midline deductible, and the other one might have a lower deductible, though you might pay more out of pocket. It is a lot to know, and it's confusing to most of us to try and understand that entire benefits package, and reading the fine print, and why you might struggle with anxiety, depression. That's anxiety provoking.
Excuse me. It is. And I think one of the other things is, as we mentioned, we're going to talk kind of about like non-traditional therapies, which, doesn't mean that they're all, some of them are therapies, like, massage therapy, physical therapy, like those also use the word therapy in their practice and how they work with people, and can be both not just like recreational, like it can be healing. I know people who are certified Reiki specialists or Reiki masters, and sometimes that is something that they utilize or use in massage therapy. And so sometimes it's not necessarily something that they talk to you about, but it's incorporated in the massage. So like as you get the massage, they'll just kind of talk about, what they call chakra points. So it's kind of just like different energy points within your body, and how each of them kind of relate to stress that's going on and things like that. Other things could be sound healing. So there's things like dance therapy and music therapy. And sometimes there are therapists who are trained to use music and dance as therapy. But it can be, healing just to engage in, dancing or sound or music and things like that. And I think people naturally use these, to help to cope with their frustrations or the things that they go through in life. And it's always funny because there's always nuance in things, because there's always like, this is good for you, this is bad for you, this is good for you, this is bad for you. And there's always this back and forth. And one of them has to do with when you're sad, right? And they tell you, like, I've heard, when you're sad, don't listen to sad music, because it's going to make you more sad, versus something that just came out, which was when you listen to it for 12 minutes, it actually like validates your sadness and makes you feel better.
I know. How do you navigate all that?
But it's kind of like the things, again, like, natural ways, if you want to call it healing or support. And people have been doing this without, like you said, like you don't have to learn everything to, in a sense, experience the benefits that can come from it, right? I think one of the common things you hear a lot is, you should go exercise more, or sleep more. And it's like, well, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, if you're overwhelmed, then obviously it's going to impact your sleep. And sometimes there's even just, we talk about stigma in therapy. Like, it's like people don't want to put in the effort to exercise. And it's,
Right.
You don't have to like become a bodybuilder. You don't have to go to the gym, like, going for a walk, or there's a ton of stuff on YouTube now that you can find with like light exercises, stretching, yoga. And we've talked about that too, is like finding something outside of your comfort zone, or something that you think, oh, that's not for me. Because I think that speaks to how people get really rigid in their routines and they get stuck, right? And so like when we think about even the therapies of CBT and DBT, like sometimes people then go into therapy because they're looking for a change. They're unhappy where they are, they feel stuck. and they want, growth or healing or to better understand themselves. And so I think there's, a balance, that people have to figure out, like, do I put this effort into, changing growth, or do I stay where I am? And I don't think people often question that. And so they stay where they are.
Right, right. We talk about the unhealthy, comfortable place, right? Staying in the place that I know versus the unknown of the other side of that, right? And the fear of, well, if I make this change, then what happens?
Mm-hmm.
And whatever choice we make in life comes with its own set of problems at the end of the day. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about choosing to deal with those problems or these problems, right? And trying, evaluate it and just kind of look at the pros and cons to each of those things. And so, people want to feel better. People don't want to feel negative emotions. They don't want to go through bad things in life. And that is life, right? Ups and downs, good and bad, ugly, all of that. And so it's more about how am I going to manage those things when they come?
Mm-hmm.
Or if they, sometimes we think things are going to happen that never happen.
Yep.
The what if the sky falls? Well, hasn't fallen yet, so I'm not going to worry about it. Right? It's being able to kind of challenge those things and create change so that you don't feel stuck. And be able to, and when you were talking about, you go to the doctors and they're like, you need to exercise more, you need to eat healthy, you need to do all these things. And then they miss the piece of this person has chronic pain. So moving is difficult. Walking is difficult. So how do we support that to create change, right? I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling down. Well, listen to some music. Go, go take a warm bath, right? So I think it's finding balance of maybe having different threads of each thing that works best for you and creating that change in your life, And, it's kind of when they give you a list of 30 providers and say, here, make these calls. I'm really depressed. I can't even shower. I can't get out of bed. And you want me to make all these calls? Are you nuts? Again, so it's about being aware of what are we asking people to do and can they do it?
Yeah.
Sometimes they can. Sometimes they need a little gentle nudging, or they need to find a way to get there that's different than go eat 3 meals a day, go exercise 4 days a week at the gym. It's easy to say those things, though it's not. I worked with a client who was in a car accident, never had anxiety before, had extreme anxiety. And the doctor says, just get in the car and drive every day. Just make yourself drive every day. That exacerbated the anxiety. It made it worse for her. And it's like, okay, so what do those steps look like and how do we get there? So that you can get back in your car and be independent, right? So we can't just tell people what to do. We're not here to fix people. We're here to help people figure out how to help themselves.
I think that's the hard part too, because it's like people want to be told what to do, but they don't. They're like, tell me what to do, and then they're like, I tried that. Yes, but.
Right.
So I think
don't know what to do.
Yeah, and sometimes that's why they go to doctors or therapists, is because like they're looking for that support. And then it's always interesting because it's always about getting the person to, and I think that's why sometimes it, in a way fails when doctors are like, you need to do this, because it's based on like a forever model where it's always advice giving, and people oftentimes now, even now, they know what to do. They know what they need to do. And so I feel it's always more about like, what are the smaller things that you can give someone advice to do? Like Go to bed at the same time every night. That's it. Eat a fruit, one fruit a day. That's it. And then I'll see you in a month, or I'll see you in 6 months. Like, small habits.
Yeah, sometimes it's those small steps because big change is hard. And so if we can, and then we learn to how to tolerate it and how to manage it better when we can do it in smaller steps. And, instead of looking at the big piece of pie, we're looking at slivers of the pie in order to be able to manage it more effectively. And then you're building a stronger foundation by doing that versus going for the end goal, failing miserably, and then further back than where you started initially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a big mystery.
And there's no easy answers. It's just asking questions, having conversations, talking to other people and saying, hey, what worked for you? Or, it can be anything. It's, I think, I used to run a garden group and people thought it was crazy. And it was one of the best groups I ever had because it was different. It wasn't sitting in an office and talking about how you feel. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about the things that happened or, coping skills and all that stuff. They learned all that doing garden work, being physical, conflict resolution. Like, I don't like the way you're digging that hole. You got to dig it this way. How do you work through that, right? Mm-hmm. I don't like the mums. I'd rather have the chrysanthemums, and all of that stuff. And it was a sense of accomplishment. Like, we made a garden and we did this, and, just a sense of pride and accomplishment and purpose, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that's something we sometimes lose in life is our sense of purpose and, why am I here? And, life is hard and, yeah, life is hard. And there's still a lot of good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that kind of ties into kind of what we were talking about is, or how like everyone learns differently. And I think we have, we need a change in like our systems that are around like education, because again, since we all learn differently, and we're just, people are just being trained to teach a certain way for the largest group, and like everyone has to conform a certain way, versus like how do you get students to like collaborate and do critical thinking and make those connections and foster like curiosity versus like everything's a yes or no answer. It's black or white, right or wrong. Mm-hmm. If you think you're going to be wrong, like you're not going to say anything, versus like how do you empower people to like try even if it's not the quote unquote right answer, because there can be a lot of things that come from people just trying and not fearing like that it has to be right.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us here today. On the next episode, we will talk a little more in depth about somatic breath work. So if that's something that you're interested in, please tune in next time. Take care.